It was 3:17 p.m. when the last balloon began to sag. The purple ribbon slid slowly down the wall, the sound faint but sharp in the quiet. My daughter sat cross-legged on the floral rug, still wearing her light blue party dress, its hem slightly wrinkled from waiting. Her hair had started to fall out of the braid I'd carefully done that morning. She stared at the front door like it might magically swing open. Imagine planning your daughter's birthday, and no one shows up. What would you do next? Don't look away. This story will grip you from the very first second. But it didn't. No cars slowed down on the street. No footsteps echoed on the porch. The doorbell stayed silent. I looked at the clock again, 3:18 now. The party had started at 2. I'd set out extra chairs, lined them neatly against the wall so parents could sit and talk while the kids played. The cake, a small pink one with her favorite sprinkles, sat untouched on the kitchen counter. Even the music I'd put on earlier, soft, cheerful pop songs, had ended, leaving only the faint hum of the refrigerator. My daughter's voice was small. Maybe they're running late. I forced a smile. Maybe. Inside, something sharp pressed against my chest, but I stayed still. I've lived long enough to know silence can reveal more than shouting. At 3:25 I stepped outside. The October air carried a damp chill and I wrapped my shawl tighter. I scanned the empty street, the neatly parked cars of neighbors who had promised to come. Mrs. Cooper from down the street said she'd bring cookies. The Wilson boys had RSVP'd with a definitely. My sister had sworn she'd be here early to help. The only movement was a few dry leaves skittering across the pavement. I knew then no one was coming. I walked back inside quietly, not wanting her to hear the door creak like a sigh. She was still sitting there, clutching a small handmade sign that said, "Welcome friends," in her uneven handwriting. She'd stayed up the night before making it, gluing tiny paper stars to the corners. "Should we light the candles anyway?" she asked. I nodded. Of course. We sang together, just the two of us. Her voice cracked on the last line, but she blew out the candles in one strong breath. I clapped loud and steady, letting the sound fill the emptiness. She laughed, but it didn't reach her eyes. Around 4 o'clock I started cleaning up. The paper plates went back into the pantry. The juice boxes into the fridge. I folded the tablecloth neatly like I always do when something hurts. Busy hands, quiet mind. She helped me, still in her party dress, placing the unused goodie bags back into the box with a kind of fragile care. She didn't cry. That almost made it worse. When she went upstairs to change, I sat at the kitchen table and let the silence settle. I'd seen neglect before, heard it, felt it, but this was different. This wasn't strangers. This was family. Neighbors. People who had shared our table. And they hadn't even texted. Not one message. I picked up my phone out of habit, maybe to check if I'd made a mistake on the time. I hadn't. The event reminder was right there. Saturday 2 p.m., birthday party at home. The only notification blinking on my screen was a group chat photo from my sister. She was at a nail salon with a few of the mothers who had promised to come. Champagne glasses in hand. Smiling. I zoomed in. There was my mother too, wearing her red shawl, laughing like it was any other day. Not a single mention of the birthday. No excuse. No "we'll be late." Nothing. The betrayal didn't scream. It whispered. By evening the house smelled like vanilla cake and disappointment. I tucked my daughter into bed and kissed her forehead. She didn't ask why no one came. She just whispered, "Thank you for the cake, Mom," and turned over. I sat there for a few minutes, watching her shoulders rise and fall, my hands clenched softly in my lap. When I finally went downstairs, the light from the fridge spilled across the floor as I reached for a glass of water. That's when my phone buzzed. "Mom, hey. Can you send $1,850 for your sister's Sweet 16 next month? We need to book the venue this week." I read it twice. My thumb hovered over the screen. My daughter's empty party echoed in my mind. They didn't show up. Not one of them. And now, not even 3 hours later, they were asking me for money for her party. I put the glass down carefully, the sound of it touching the counter a quiet click that felt final. I didn't delete the message. I didn't reply right away either. I just sat there staring at the screen with a calm that surprised even me. Because I wasn't angry. I was awake. The next morning, Sunday, I drove to church early. Not for service. I volunteer in the library before the crowds arrive. It's quiet there like a vault for unspoken thoughts. I sat at the small desk, flipping through the sign and ledger absent-mindedly. Names. Dates. Times. Names. Every parent. Every relative. Every so-called friend who didn't bother to show up. I took out a notepad and wrote them all down one by one. Not to confront them. Not yet. Just to remember. Because at 65, I've learned that memory can be sharper than any blade if you keep it clean. Later that afternoon I stopped by the local grocery store. The same mothers were there, chatting by the bakery section. When they saw me, their smiles faltered for just a second, long enough to tell me they remembered. "Hey, how was the party?" Mrs. Cooper chirped. "Too bright. Too fake." I tilted my head. "Oh, it was lovely. Quiet." Her smile stiffened. She shifted the cookie box in her hands. Another woman added quickly, "We, got caught up yesterday. Last-minute thing." I nodded like I understood. Of course. These things happen. Inside I stored their excuses like files. Before leaving, I picked up a small notepad from the stationery aisle. Bright red cover. Clean pages. I placed it in my purse next to my wallet. Monday came with a damp fog. I walked to the mailbox wearing my old wool sweater, the one my late husband used to tease me about for never throwing away. The cold bit at my fingers as I sorted through the letters. Bills. A church newsletter. And then, an envelope with my sister's handwriting. Inside was a formal invitation draft for her daughter's Sweet 16. A ballroom in town. Live DJ. Catered dinner. A gold-trimmed RSVP card. She had even added a note. "We know you'll help out like always. Mom's texting you the amount today." I traced the embossed lettering with my thumb. The nerve. They expected me to pay. Like I always did. Like nothing had happened. I set the invitation on the table and made myself tea. Chamomile. No sugar. The steam curled upward as I stared at the gold lettering again. That's when the idea didn't just whisper. It spoke. There are advantages to being the one who quietly handles things. I'd always managed the family's bookings. I'd paid the deposits for their events more times than I could count. My name was often the one on the receipts. The one they forgot was holding the strings. They'd forgotten. But I hadn't. That evening, I walked into the living room where my daughter was doing homework. She looked up at me curious. "Can we do something special this weekend?" she asked. I smiled. "Yes. Something just for us." She didn't need to know the details. Not yet. I pulled out the red notebook after she went to bed. I opened to the first blank page and wrote at the top in neat, slow letters. Names to remember. Underneath, I listed each person who had turned their back that day. Then beside each name I left space. Empty, waiting. For what? Even I wasn't sure yet. But I felt something I hadn't in years. A calm, deliberate certainty. This wasn't rage. This was preparation. The following Saturday I stopped by my mother's house. She was in the kitchen chatting loudly with my sister about the Sweet 16 plans. The moment I walked in, the air shifted slightly. She smiled, wide and rehearsed. "Did you get my message?" she asked. I nodded. "I did. So, you'll send it this week, right? We need to secure the venue by Friday." I set my purse down slowly. "I'll think about it." My sister rolled her eyes. "What's there to think about? You always help." I met her gaze. Steady. Maybe that's the problem. For the first time her smile cracked. I didn't say more. I didn't need to. Because the list was made. The invitations were printed. And the clock had started ticking. And though no one came to my daughter's birthday, I remembered every single name. That thought still sat with me hours after I came home from my mother's kitchen. I placed my purse down, removed my shoes, and stood in the entryway of my quiet house. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and the vanilla candle I'd lit that morning. Everything looked exactly as it should, except for one thing. The locks. Those locks had been turned by too many hands that didn't respect this home. My sister used to let herself in unannounced. My mother came by whenever she pleased. A few cousins still had keys from years ago. I had always told myself it was family. But now, after the way they'd treated my daughter's birthday, I saw it for what it was. Access without respect. I opened the kitchen drawer, the one where I kept old house keys bundled together on a ring. Each one held a quiet history. I ran my thumb over them and exhaled slowly. "Not anymore," I whispered. The next morning I drove to the hardware store just after sunrise. The parking lot was still half empty, the pavement damp with early dew. I liked it that way, quiet. Inside, the smell of sawdust and paint was sharp but oddly grounding. The young man at the counter greeted me with a half-awake smile. "Morning. What can I help you with?" "I need new locks. Deadbolts. Front and back doors," I said. He asked a few routine questions. I answered calmly, methodically, like someone checking off a list. Because that's exactly what I was doing. Checking off the first step. By 8:45 a.m. I was back home with a small box, a screwdriver, and a fresh sense of control. My hands moved steadily as I removed each old lock, the metal creaking slightly as if reluctant to let go. I replaced them with new ones, solid, clean, untouched by anyone but me. The morning light filtered through the curtains, catching tiny dust particles that floated like secrets in the air. Click. One door secured. Click. Another. With each turn of the screwdriver, my heartbeat steadied. By the time I tightened the last screw, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Power. Around noon, my mother arrived. I saw her car from the kitchen window. A familiar beige sedan pulling into the driveway like it always had. She didn't call. She never did. The sound of her key sliding unsuccessfully into the new lock echoed through the hallway. I waited. She tried again. Then came the knocking. "Open up," she shouted. Her voice wasn't angry yet, just surprised. I opened the door calmly. "Good afternoon, Mom." She stepped inside without asking, still clutching her useless key. "Why doesn't this work?" "I changed the locks." She stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. "You what?" "I changed the locks," I repeated steady. "I needed to update the security." Her eyebrows pinched together. "You didn't even tell me." "I've had this key for years." "Yes," I said softly. "That's part of the problem." She didn't respond. Instead, she set her purse on the console table like she owned the place. That small action, so casual, so entitled, pressed something inside me. A few minutes later, my sister showed up. She must have gotten a call from Mom. I watched from the hallway as she confidently tried her own key. When it didn't work, she frowned and rang the bell. I opened the door. She crossed her arms. "What's this about?" "New locks," I said. "Why?" I shrugged slightly. "Why not?" She rolled her eyes. "You're being dramatic. Over a kid's party." Something in her tone, dismissive, light, ignited a quiet fire in my chest. "It wasn't just a party," I said. She sighed like she was tired of explaining something obvious. "You can't just lock family out of the house." I tilted my head. "Funny. You all locked us out emotionally first." Her smirk faltered for the first time. "They didn't like boundaries." "Not one bit." Mom paced the living room while my sister leaned against the wall, both of them radiating disbelief. "We've always come and gone," Mom said. "It's how family works." "It's how it used to work," I replied. My sister scoffed. "So what, you're cutting us out now?" "No," I said slowly. "I'm drawing a line. There's a difference." For a moment, the room was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Then Mom tried again, this time in that practiced soft tone she used when she wanted something. "Honey, I understand you're upset, but this isn't necessary." I met her eyes. "It is for me." After they left, slamming the door behind them, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea. The house was quiet again. But it wasn't the same quiet as before. This quiet was mine. I opened the red notebook from the night before and drew a small line under the last name. Beside it I wrote, "Keys returned, no more free entry." One boundary down. Many more to go. Later that week, a letter arrived from the event venue my sister had mentioned. It was addressed to me. I recognized the logo immediately, an elegant hall downtown. Inside was a notice confirming a pending deposit for the Sweet 16. My name was listed as the responsible party. Of course it was. They'd used my name and credit details for bookings for years because I had better standing. It had always been easier that way. I'd signed things, paid deposits, and they reimbursed me later. Usually. I set the letter on the table and traced my finger over my own signature. They might think I was still the same woman who quietly handled everything. But those locks weren't the only thing that had changed. On Thursday afternoon, I overheard a conversation outside while watering the front garden. Mom and my sister were by the mailbox talking too loudly to be discreet. She's losing it, my sister hissed. She'll come around, Mom said. She always does. Not this time. I pulled the garden hose closer, the water spraying rhythmically against the soil. I didn't say a word. Just listened. Mom continued, we need that deposit processed. The hall won't hold the date otherwise. She'll give in. She always gives in. I smiled faintly, hidden by the rosebush. Not anymore. That Sunday they both returned again, this time together. The sky was overcast, the air heavy with the promise of rain. Their footsteps sounded sharp on the porch. I opened the door just enough to lean against the frame. Mom went straight to the point. We need you to finalize the Sweet 16 deposit by Friday. They sent the letter, right? I got it, I said. So? My sister's tone was sharp. So nothing, I replied. Mom blinked. You're not seriously thinking of backing out, are you? We need this to go smoothly. Everyone will be there. I looked at her. Really looked. The woman who had stood laughing in a salon while my daughter waited for guests. Everyone will be there, I repeated softly. Except the people who mattered when it counted. She started to argue, but I raised my hand. Stop. I'm not doing this right now. My sister muttered under her breath. She's lost it. I almost laughed. Not out of amusement but out of the sheer irony. Lost it? I said. No. I've finally found it. I closed the door before they could reply. The sound of the lock clicking into place was firm and final. That night as I tidied the kitchen, my daughter patted in wearing her pajamas. Grandma was loud again, she said sleepily. I knelt down to her level. I know, sweetheart. But sometimes when people get used to things being one way, they get upset when it changes. She tilted her head. Are we in trouble? I smiled gently. No. Not us. I tucked her back into bed, kissed her forehead and lingered for a moment, listening to the rain start tapping against the windows. The locks were changed. The lines were drawn. They thought I would bend eventually. But they were about to learn. This was only the beginning. I wiped my hands on the dish towel, folded it neatly over the oven handle and sat down at the kitchen table. The rain had slowed outside, tapping lightly against the windows like a soft metronome. My tea had gone cold, but I didn't mind. I wasn't looking for comfort. I was looking for clarity. On the table lay the letter from the venue, the envelope already creased at the corners from how many times I'd opened it. The date of the Sweet 16 was circled in blue pen. My name was still listed as the financial contact, bold and in ink. I traced my finger over the line slowly. They thought they were holding the reins. But in reality I had signed the contract. The venue, the DJ, the catering, every piece of this celebration was quietly tethered to me. And I was done letting them forget that. The next morning I called the venue. The receptionist recognized my name instantly. Good morning, Mrs. Harris. Calling about the booking for the Sweet 16. Her voice was cheerful, unaware of the storm quietly brewing behind mine. Yes, I said calmly. I'd like to review the account details and confirm the deposit arrangements. Of course. One moment. The sound of clicking keys filled the line. She came back quickly. Yes, you're the primary on the account. Deposit is pending. If we don't receive it by Friday, the date will be released. My lips curved slightly. Thank you. I'll handle it. And I meant it. Just not the way they expected. That afternoon I sat at my desk in the small study, a room most people forgot existed in my house. The walls were lined with old family photos and my late husband's books. The smell of old paper and cedar always grounded me. I pulled out my filing cabinet and flipped through the folders. Bank statements. Old contracts. Receipts from past family events I'd funded. It was all there in neat labeled sections. Years of being the responsible one had turned me into the family's quiet backbone. And now that same organization gave me the upper hand. I found the folder for event bookings and set it on the desk. Inside, the previous Sweet 16 for my eldest niece, fully funded by me, reimbursed months later in partial payments, some still outstanding. A charity dinner I'd co-signed for. A baby shower deposit they forgot to pay back. I took out a yellow notepad and started listing each unpaid balance, each broken promise. When I was done, I had 2 pages of numbers and names. For years I'd been their safety net. But the net was about to tighten. On Wednesday I made my next call, to the cake shop. Sweet Treats Bakery, this is Karen speaking. Hi Karen, this is Linda Harris. I have an order under my name for a Sweet 16 cake scheduled for the 18th. Oh yes. The large 3-tier with lilac flowers and the gold accents. Beautiful choice. I almost laughed. I need to make a change to the delivery. Of course. What's the new address? I gave her the address of the retirement home 2 towns over where my church volunteers once a month. They loved cake there. And they never got extravagant ones like this. Karen typed quickly. All set. Same date, new delivery location. No problem. I thanked her, hung up and stared at the notepad. One thread pulled. Later that afternoon I took a walk through the neighborhood. The sun had come out after days of rain, making the sidewalks shimmer. My neighbors were outside, pruning bushes, chatting by their mailboxes. I passed by the Cooper house. The same woman who'd chirped about being caught up on my daughter's birthday. She was talking to another mother, both of them holding iced coffees, their voices carrying easily across the quiet street. And the Sweet 16 is going to be huge, Mrs. Cooper said. Everyone's talking about it. I slowed my pace just enough to hear. She's always so generous, the other replied. Linda probably booked the best for them again. I smiled faintly. Let them talk. Let them believe. For now. Thursday brought a surprise. A soft knock on my door, not the pounding I'd grown used to but gentle. When I opened it, it was Mrs. Whitman, an older woman from church. She held a small envelope. I know this is sudden, she said softly, but we're hosting a luncheon for the retirement home next weekend. I heard through Karen at the bakery that a cake was being sent to them anonymously. Was that you? I blinked, caught off guard for a moment. It might have been. Her smile was warm, genuine. You have a good heart, Linda. They'll love it. I accepted the envelope she handed me. It was an invitation to speak at the luncheon, something they rarely extended. As I closed the door, a thought clicked into place. Not only was I pulling threads from their party, I was quietly weaving new ones elsewhere. Later that day I made another quiet call. This time to a few of the parents on the guest list. Hi, this is Linda. I just wanted to give you a quick heads up. There may be some issues with the venue for the Sweet 16. Nothing official yet, but I'd keep an eye on communications. You know how these things can go. I kept my tone friendly, concerned, like someone just looking out for the community. By the 4th call, the questions were already spreading. What kind of issues? Should we be worried about safety? I'll talk to my husband about it. I never gave details. Just gentle nudges. By the end of the day, whispers had started to drift back through my own social circle. The kind of whispers that make parents second-guess committing to an event. That evening, my sister texted me. Sister, we're hearing some rumors about the party? Did you say something? Me, rumors. Sister, parents are asking questions. Did you start this? Me, why would I? I'm just at home. Technically not a lie. She called 5 minutes later, her voice sharp. Cut it out, Linda. This party is important. So is my daughter's, I replied evenly. This isn't the same thing, she snapped. You're right, I said. This one isn't mine to worry about. I hung up before she could answer. My hands didn't shake. Not anymore. Friday morning came quietly. I made coffee and sat by the window watching the mailman make his rounds. My daughter came downstairs sleepily, her hair a mess. Morning, she mumbled. Morning, sweetheart. She climbed into the chair across from me. You look different lately. I raised a brow. Different how? More like you don't care what Grandma says anymore. I laughed softly. Maybe I finally don't. She grinned, the kind of grin that made me want to protect her forever. Good. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just about revenge. It was about rewriting the rules for both of us. That afternoon, I checked my voicemail. The venue had called again. Mrs. Harris, we just wanted to confirm. The deposit still hasn't been received. If it's not finalized by 5 p.m., the date will be released. I glanced at the clock. 3:42 p.m. I didn't call back. Instead, I folded the letter, slid it into my desk drawer and closed it gently. By early evening, I got the first frantic call from my mother. Linda, why didn't you pay the deposit? They're saying the date might be lost. I leaned against the counter, stirring my tea. Because it's not my responsibility anymore. You've always. Exactly, I interrupted. I've always. Not this time. Her voice cracked with disbelief. Do you know what this will do to your sister? Yes, I said. I do. I hung up before the pleading could turn to insults. That night, as the house settled into quiet, I opened my red notebook again. I flipped to the second page where I'd started jotting down the threads I'd pulled. Venue deposit, unpaid. Cake delivery rerouted. Guest whispers started. One by one, the foundations of their perfect celebration were beginning to shift. Not through rage or screaming. Through steady, deliberate movements. I wasn't cutting the rope all at once. I was unraveling it strand by strand. And by the time the night of the Sweet 16 arrived, that rope was already hanging by threads so thin, they were bound to snap the moment anyone tugged too hard. The air that Saturday evening was heavy, one of those humid spring nights when even the breeze feels tired. From my living room window, I could see the neighborhood slowly emptying as cars headed toward the downtown event hall. Headlights streaked across the wet pavement like glowing ribbons. I sat at the kitchen table with my cup of tea, calm as a stone in still water. My daughter was upstairs finishing her homework, completely uninterested in the celebration that had once been plastered across every conversation at church, school, and family dinners. The clock ticked past 6. The party was supposed to start at 7. Around 6:30 my phone started buzzing, first with texts then calls. I didn't answer. I simply watched the screen light up again and again. Sister. Unknown numbers. One after another, each one rolling over to voicemail. I took another sip of tea. The faint scent of chamomile filled the air, grounding me. Then came the first message that made me smile. Not a happy smile, but the kind that comes when justice finally starts to breathe. Venue receptionist. Mrs. Harris, just a courtesy call. We released the hall at 5 p.m. per policy. No deposit received. We've already had inquiries about rebooking the space. Please call if you have questions. No questions. None at all. By 7:10 the neighborhood Facebook group lit up. I wasn't looking for it, it found me. Anyone know what's going on at Maplewood Hall? Doors locked, lights off. Did we get the date wrong? My daughter's dressed up and no one's there. This is bizarre. We drove 30 minutes for this. I scrolled through the posts slowly, watching confusion ripple outward like a stone hitting a pond. Parents tagging other parents. Teenagers posting photos in their fancy dresses standing outside a dark, empty hall. And then someone shared a shaky video of the parking lot, clusters of guests milling around, heels sinking into wet pavement, murmuring to each other. In the background you could hear my sister's voice rising, sharp and panicked. At 7:22 p.m. she finally called again. I answered this time. Linda. Her voice cracked through the line. What did you do? Kept my voice measured. I'm at home. Drinking tea. The hall is locked. There's no cake, no music. People are leaving. I let a small silence stretch. Sounds unfortunate. Don't play dumb with me. You were the financial contact. You were supposed to pay the deposit. No, I said evenly. You assumed I would. I never agreed to it. She went quiet for a beat like she couldn't quite believe I'd said it. Mom's crying. Do you understand what you've done? I did. Every inch of it. But I didn't answer. I simply said, good night, and hung up. Outside, thunder rumbled low in the distance and then the rain came, not a drizzle but a steady, heavy pour. I stepped out onto the porch and watched the street glisten under the lamplight. It was peaceful in a way that almost felt too poetic. Meanwhile, downtown their perfect night was falling apart. I pictured my mother in her red shawl, soaked at the edges, clutching her purse while guests whispered. I pictured my sister trying to bark orders at venue staff that weren't even there. I pictured teenagers, their makeup running, filming it all for their social media feeds. For once, their chaos wasn't my burden to carry. Around 8:30 my neighbor Mrs. Cooper knocked on my door. She was still wearing the same pink dress she'd posted about earlier in the week. Her hair was frizzed from the rain. Linda, she said, almost laughing in disbelief. Do you know what's happening? We showed up to the hall, it was empty. Lights off, everything. I tilted my head slightly. I heard. Heard? It's everywhere. Parents are furious. The Wilsons turned back halfway. Even Pastor Allen was there. Is that so? I said gently. She leaned closer. They're saying the deposit was never paid. And that you were listed on the paperwork. That's correct, I replied. My name was on the paperwork. But responsibility isn't the same as obligation, is it? She blinked, unsure how to respond. I gave her a warm smile. It's such a shame the weather didn't cooperate too. Her mouth opened, then closed again. She left a few seconds later, speechless. By 9, social media was a storm of its own. Photos, videos, hashtags. Some parents were sympathetic. How awful. Must have been a mix-up. Others weren't. One mother posted a long, angry message about poor planning and irresponsibility. Teenagers uploaded clips mocking the fancy party with no lights. And in the middle of it all, a picture started circulating. One I hadn't posted that night but a week earlier. My daughter in her blue dress, smiling shyly in our decorated living room, holding a small cake. The caption, "We celebrated alone. Now so will they." Someone must have dug it up from my page. And it spread. Fast. Around 9:30 my mother arrived. She didn't knock softly this time. Her fists hit the door like she could pound her way through everything she'd ignored. I opened it just enough to see her. Her hair wet, shawl-soaked, eyes furious and tired. "How could you?" she hissed. "You humiliated this family." I met her gaze. I didn't humiliate anyone. I simply stopped fixing what wasn't mine to fix. She stepped closer, rain dripping from her sleeves onto my doormat. "You've always been cold. Always making yourself the victim." That made me laugh quietly. If remembering my daughter on her birthday makes me a victim, then so be it. She shook her head. "You'll regret this." "No, Mom," I said softly. "For once I won't." I closed the door gently. Not slammed, gently. That quiet sound landed harder than anything else. As the night wore on, I stayed up not out of anxiety but out of clarity. This wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about accountability. They had built their celebrations on my reliability, on my willingness to quietly handle every detail, to fund what they wouldn't, to smooth over every mistake. And when I stepped away, it all crumbled, because their structure had never been strong. I walked through the house slowly. My daughter's school project was laid out on the dining table. The smell of rain seeped in through a cracked window. I felt lighter. Near midnight, my sister sent one last message. "Sister, you ruined everything. No one will ever forget this." I stared at it for a long moment. She was right, but not in the way she meant. I typed slowly, "Good," and hit send. I turned off the lights and went to bed. Outside, the rain finally softened to a quiet drizzle. My house felt warm, safe, and for the first time in years, completely mine. The night they thought would be their grand celebration had dissolved into confusion, whispers, and wet shoes. The Sweet 16 became the night that never happened. And I slept soundly. When I woke up the next morning, the house was quiet except for the soft hum of the ceiling fan. For once, there were no missed calls waiting, no early morning texts from my mother, no sister demanding a talk. It was 7:02 a.m. and sunlight spilled through the curtains like it belonged here. I wrapped my robe around me, padded to the kitchen and brewed my coffee slowly. No rush, no tension sitting in my chest. The night before had been a storm, but this morning felt like the clean air that follows one. I sat at the table sipping from my favorite chipped mug. The red notebook was still there from the night before, resting closed. My daughter came downstairs yawning, dragging her slippers. "Morning," she murmured. "Morning, sweetheart," I replied. She climbed into her usual chair, eyes still heavy. "Did they call?" I shook my head. "No." She gave a small, satisfied smile, the kind children make when they finally see someone stand up for them. She didn't say anything else and she didn't need to. Around 10 a.m. the phone finally rang. I didn't rush to answer. I let it ring twice, then picked up, keeping my tone calm. "Linda," she started immediately, her voice still raw from the night before. "The police were here this morning." My stomach didn't tighten. My hands didn't shake. I simply said, "Why?" "They came to me first," she snapped. "The venue contacted them about the deposit. Your name was on the contract. Do you understand the mess you've made?" I leaned back in my chair, watching dust motes float lazily in the morning light. "I didn't make a mess. I followed the contract. No deposit, no booking. That's their policy." "You could have told us," she shouted. "I did," I said evenly. Every time you assumed I'd handle something I told you, this time I wouldn't. She paused, realizing I wasn't budging. They said they might involve legal action. I almost laughed. Then they'll find out the legal contact was you, Mom. I changed that weeks ago. It was true. The day after the deposit letter arrived, I'd filed a simple amendment with the venue, shifting legal responsibility to her name. No deception. Just paperwork. She'd signed it years ago as co-responsible on other events. She'd never bothered to read the fine print. Check your email, I added. They sent the revised contract weeks ago. Silence. Then in a quieter, shaken voice, you really did this? Yes, I said softly. I really did. By noon, a patrol car pulled into the cul-de-sac. My daughter peered through the living room curtains. Mom? It's fine, I said gently. 2 officers knocked, not aggressively, just procedural. I opened the door. Ma'am, one of them began politely, we received a report about a contractual dispute regarding the Maplewood Hall booking. You're listed as the original contact. That's correct, I replied, handing them a folder I'd already prepared. Inside, the revised contract, dated and signed, transferring responsibility. Copies of emails. Receipts showing I'd made no payment and hadn't been obligated to. The younger officer flipped through the documents, nodded slightly. This looks in order. The older one glanced at me. Family matter? Yes, I said simply. He exhaled like he'd seen it 100 times. We'll note that everything's legally clean. Sorry to bother you. No bother, I said with a small smile. They left without incident. My daughter watched them drive away, then turned to me. You're not scared? I crouched down to her level. Not when I know I've done nothing wrong. Her eyes widened slightly, absorbing every word. That afternoon I drove to my mother's house. Not to apologize. Not to argue. To end it. When I pulled into her driveway, I saw her car, my sisters, and a few relatives. They were gathered in the living room when I walked in. The air smelled like stale perfume and leftover anger. My sister stood first. You ruined everything, she spat. People are laughing at us. I didn't flinch. They're not laughing at me. Mom's eyes were bloodshot, her voice trembling between fury and humiliation. You made us look like fools. No, I said, setting my purse down slowly on the coffee table. You made yourselves look like fools. I just stopped covering for you. My uncle, who'd stayed mostly out of the drama, cleared his throat. She has a point. They always rely on her. My sister whirled toward him. Not now. I raised a hand calmly. No, let him speak. For once. He met my eyes with a knowing look. It's true, Linda. You've been the safety net for years. They took advantage. My sister scoffed. Oh, don't act like she's some saint. He loves control. That's what this is. I turned to her slowly. Control? You mean like signing my name on contracts without asking? Or expecting me to pay thousands because you assume I won't say no? Her mouth opened but no sound came out. I walked over to the fireplace mantel where family photos lined the shelf. There was one of my daughter's birthday from years ago, packed with people, laughter frozen in time. I picked it up. You know, I said quietly, I let this go on for too long because I wanted her to grow up surrounded by family. I thought I was protecting her. I set the frame back down carefully. But family doesn't ignore your child's birthday and then demand money for someone else's celebration. The room was silent. For once, no one had a clever response. I turned back toward Mom. I've made some decisions, I said calmly. The spare keys you all had, those won't work anymore. The accounts, the contracts, the little favors I've been doing for decades, they're done. I've notified the venues, the caterers, and the bank. My name is no longer tied to any of it. My sister scoffed, but it was weaker now. You can't just cut us off. I met her eyes. I already have. Mom's voice cracked. And what about me? I'm your mother. You're my mother, I agreed softly. And I love you. But love isn't blind anymore. Her lip trembled. For a moment I almost softened. But then I remembered my daughter's face at her empty birthday party, the quiet way she blew out her candles. I held my ground. On my way out, my sister followed me onto the porch. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the steps. You think this makes you powerful? She hissed. No, I said. It makes me free. She folded her arms. You'll regret this. I looked at her one last time. I don't knock anymore. And I walked away. When I got home, my daughter was waiting on the porch swing. She looked up from her book. How was it? I sat beside her, letting the quiet settle. Final. She leaned her head against my shoulder. Good. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in soft pinks and golds. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the next phone call, the next demand, the next guilt trip. The locks were changed. The threads were pulled. The night had passed. And I had drawn the line so clearly that no one dared cross it again. Later that week, I received a small handwritten note from the retirement home. They'd loved the cake. The residents had shared it during their weekend luncheon, calling it the fanciest dessert they'd ever had. I tucked the note into my red notebook, a reminder that not all celebrations end in humiliation. Some end in quiet victories. A few months passed. Invitations stopped arriving. Calls became less frequent. Some relatives avoided me altogether. Others slowly began to approach me differently, not with demands but with respect. Mom eventually apologized, not perfectly, not all at once, but in her way. She brought my daughter a small homemade cake on her next birthday, just the three of us. It wasn't grand, but it was genuine. And that was enough. Standing on my porch one summer evening, I looked at the new locks glinting in the fading light. I ran my fingers over the cool metal. This house was mine again. My boundaries were mine again. I didn't need to knock. Because now I decided who came in. And who stayed out. If this story struck a chord with you, subscribe for more powerful, emotional revenge stories. Real women. Real betrayal. Unforgettable payback. Join our community, you're not alone.